Hi everybody, Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I'm going to take a look at the astrological weather forecast for the month of April 2022 here. And normally I try to get the month one done at the same time that I do the weekly one, but there just seemed to be too much information between the two things. And one of the reasons for that is really one of the most major events of this year of 2022 is occurring in April when Jupiter conjuncts Neptune in Pisces at about 24 degrees. And that is the sign that both of them rule, basically. Traditionally, Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces, and then Neptune is the modern ruler, or what I would call like a co-ruler, or has affinity with it. And so it's finishing up a 13-year what we call synodic cycle. The last time they were conjunct was back in 2009 in Aquarius. So it's a huge shift there. And that's one of the main reasons I felt like there was going to be a little too much to get in for both the week and month. There's also this month a few other little things, or big things I wanted to talk about too. We are going to have one planet go retrograde again, so we have only a few more weeks left of time where all the planets are going direct, which, like I said, is a great time to really move forward with and push forward with things that you want to do actively in the world. And so Pluto will be going retrograde on the 29th of April. And then the other thing I want to talk about too is Saturn is squaring the nodes while Jupiter sextiles the north node and trines the south node on the 11th. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about Pluto squaring Pallas right around the time it goes retrograde, and Saturn trining Ceres right around that same time too. And just so, in case you don't make it to the end and you're looking for my contact, best way to get me is through email, matthuE823@gmail.com. Do all kinds of readings, so don't hesitate to ask me, let you know what the prices are, and we can work from there. And remember, if you have YouTube, just become a follower of the Astrological Winds channel and then turn on your notifications. It's also available on multiple podcasts, Reason, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just look up Astrological Winds channel. And if you're on Instagram, you can look it up on Instagram too and become a follower there too. And on the Instagram one, sometimes I try to add some daily stuff a couple times during the week. Try to get more regular with that as time goes on. But anyway, I will go through more detailed information later at the end here. But I wanted to get into these things. So if you remember, Mars and Venus have been traveling together through Aquarius through all of March, pretty much, and they're getting close to not being together anymore. They're finally going to break that conjunction, but right in the past week or so, if you'll remember, Venus conjuncted Saturn, and then this next week, Mars is going to conjunct Saturn, and Juno is right in the zone of Saturn too, the asteroid Juno, which represents partnerships as far as an archetype goes. So what's interesting about all of that is they all have all squared the nodal axis, or are squaring the nodal axis over this period of time. Venus squared the nodal axis on March 26th last week, and I talked about that in the weekly a little bit. And then Juno actually squared the nodal axis a couple days ago on April 1st. And then this week coming up, Mars is going to square the nodal axis on the 5th, which I'll talk about a little bit in the weekly blog. And then most importantly, for the month of April, Saturn is going to square the nodal axis on April 11th. And around the same time, Jupiter is actually sextiling the north node and trining the south node, so also connecting to the nodal axis at that time. And, if you look at all that together, it really shows that old relationships, especially partnerships, are like under a lot of stress right now. They're under a point of change where something has to give, something has to change in one. And it may be so much change that old ones may actually have to go. And at the same time, when that happens, many times when you create a space, new ones will start to come in. So so Saturn is involved. And we know that Saturn has a lot to do with our real world experiences and making us deal with reality, sometimes in hard ways. And so it's not an easy assignment here. It's not an easy task. We're going to be forced into adapting somehow in reality and into these new real world situations that are coming up. And it may be very difficult to get cooperation from others, especially in partnership type situations. Basically, a lot of the old ways of doing things are being challenged. So people who are kind of like married to tradition, so to speak, they're the ones who are going to have the most difficulty changing. And we all have parts of us that are married to tradition. So there's going to be parts of us that are going to be challenged by that. Our old structures, our old forms, the way we approach things, the way we do our authority, like both as an authority and the way we receive energy from authority, will all be under stress. And really the patriarchal kind of system or the structure that's been built into that kind of system is right now, under a level of where it's having to change, that there's like a lot of restriction and inhibition being felt from old things holding back that just basically need to go away. And when you think about that in your life, that, a lot of times can be people who represent, that have some kind of authority in your life or have had that authority in your life for a long time. And, they're just, it's at a point where in order for you to move forward on your personal journey, you have to just get away from them. And here's the thing too, if you're not paying attention to these kinds of signals with Saturn, it's going to affect your body and your health. It's going to, people end up having boundary issues. So that's like skin, bone, type things, even general illness, like even being exhausted and worn down from circumstances that basically you're increasing stress to your immune system. And that means that all kinds of things can get in. And that's from not dealing correctly with the reality of the situation now, that these structures around us that we may have been relying on for a long time are changing. And the people that are attached to those structures, those partnerships that are formed around those structures, are particularly, if they can't up their game through that Aquarian energy, which is what, all these 4 planets are in, Saturn's in, that higher octave of Saturn that really wants to upload and get changes into the system. Doesn't want to throw everything out, but wants to upload those systems. So everything, the reality is that a lot of the relationships that are the older ones that are under stress, this may be the end of them. This may be where, it's the permanent cutting or detaching from that answer, because you can see that other people who have an influence on you are actually their energy is bringing you down. And it's not, I'm saying that's their fault. It's time for you, to own up to your own self-responsibility to yourself in those situations, in knowing that, their energy is affecting you and stopping you from being able to move forward. So there's this energy. So and what's interesting about it too, for many of these situations, it may have reached a point where it's so obvious at this point that that final separation or cutting is not really that big of a step anymore. It's really like all the psychology and the emotional part and all that stuff may actually already be worked through. It may just be like we have to do the physical parting of this, so because it just really makes you feel like it's impossible to stay there anymore, and so it's really the final step, to me, that it can be. And it could be also in some cases the death of some of these, people who you may have been close to for a long time. It could be kindred, family, partners, moving on, that's, would be like just one manifestation, obviously, of a final separation, but it can actually be that physical of an event. So then, like I said, Jupiter is sextiling the North Node at the same time, which means it's trining the South Node. And it shows that, once again, cleaning out this older stuff. Remember Jupiter and Saturn in that great conjunction at 1 degree Aquarius. So we are still really at the beginning of that synodic cycle where the seeds still are just, still can be planted here. The opportunities to, bring new stuff in by letting go of the old is there. And that, and what's that going to take with Jupiter sextile the North Node? It's going to take meeting people halfway. It's going to take actually committing your life force, your chi energy into doing that too. It can't just be like, oh, that sounds like a great idea, that sextile. But you know what? Not going to take the great idea and do anything with it. That's all it is, So, here we have the trine to the South Node showing that you actually have the talent and ability to do what you're being called to do in this situation with the Saturn square the nodes. And now the opportunity is going to come up to get your life moving forward and growing. That's what Jupiter promises, is that personal growth on all kinds of levels. So you have to be honest about the way you're connecting with other people and forming new partnerships. And that can be, very much business related, and that can be with different groups, and that can be with different individuals. So a very interesting start. And that's, like I said, it's really in effect already, because Venus and Mars and Juno have all squared it. Saturn's like, a slow moving planet. So it's right on that point, will be exact on the 11th, and the Jupiter's exactness to the North Node sextile be on the 8th. So really in effect already, but like definitely influencing very hard, a large chunk of this month. When things hit the node, it's usually about a 2-month transit. So 1 month on each side of that exactness. So one of the hugest events of the year is coming up in April too. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it's Jupiter conjuncting Neptune, and it's at 24 degrees of Pisces, a sign that both of them are basically rulers of. Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. Neptune is a modern day ruler, and this is something that's going to be an orb all month again. And the last time these two in their synodic cycle conjuncted was in 2009 in Aquarius. And if you think about what they really represent more than anything, it's about idealism. It's about like idealism that becomes like mystical or spiritual or religious, and is also very inspiring, imaginative. So there can be a lot of creative output, based on that idealism, like even artistic type stuff. So when you think about the last 13 years, when they conjuncted in Aquarius back in, I believe it was May of 2009, the first time, that is like really fitting because the last 13 years, we've seen a huge shift in what people's ideals and the way that they look at mysticism and religion and spirituality, where we've seen the intellect, artificial intelligence, technology, science have all kind of integrated into like a spiritual focus too, but have also influenced what that spiritual focus kind of is. You know, like it's taking a lot of that like old time traditional stuff, religion and stuff, and giving it like an upgrade that's more tolerant, more all encompassing, and even to the point of like artificial things that humans have created being like part of the spiritual matrix, so to speak, in many ways. So like it's been an interesting journey these last 13 years on a spiritual level, because we're going into the age of Aquarius, and that was like a big shift in the way that people see themselves in this more mystical or religious or spiritual or belief system or ideal form, and the way they relate to the world, and how inevitably like technology had to be like introduced into that equation. I mean, look at all these, you know, movies and stuff that are sci-fi movies of that period, where one of the big questions is, how do you get the life force into AI? Or does AI actually develop its own soul, so to speak? You know, so very, very, very interesting last 13 years. And now we're going back into like a Pisces thing where these two planets are super strong. You know, they're in rulership. They're in a sign that they are most comfortable in, you know? So, you know, I think a lot of what's going to happen in this next synodic cycle is more direct experience from people again in like finding their own spiritual journey and path, like taking some kind of leap of faith, taking like their belief systems into a higher vibration, higher meaning of what it all is. And with Pisces, it's like Aquarius on that level of being two of the last signs in the zodiac, where the collective is much more important many times than the individual themselves. So it's like, okay, like it allows us in Pisces to open up compassion and tolerance and the ability to forgive and forget the past if we so choose, you know? It inspires us to like move forward in another way and to upgrade our values, and our imagination then is sparked too. So it can bring in a lot of like creative, artistical energy to individuals, a lot of inspiration where you can output a lot of this, a lot of what you're feeling, you know, a lot of this highly idealistic energy can be put into form. Not only in your like, you know, like an output that way, but like even in your mind and your heart and your attitude too. So now one of the issues though, with that, all that Piscean energy and that idealistic energy, is it is very impressionable. So we can be misled. We can get self-deluded about a lot of these ideals if we're not grounding them. And remember, Pisces is like I said, one of the most last two signs, so it's like it's all about unification, but yet the two fish are swimming away from each other and don't realize that they're connected at the tail. So what can happen with Piscean energy, with our ideals, is we can get fanatical about them. We can get and pushy, like trying to push them on others to the point where we get into an attitude of, oh, well, you're either with us or against us, which is, what the last 2,000 years in the age of Pisces has been about. A lot of, especially religious movements, having that attitude and creating a lot of destruction and violence in their wake because of it. A Dionysian myth that's kind of gone a little bit too far in creating holy wars because of our ideals. So what this Jupiter Neptune conjunction is saying after the Aquarius synodic cycle of the last 13 years is, can we actually go to the higher part of Pisces, the connecting part, the part that we see where we're compassionate, where we have empathy, where we have tolerance, where we have spiritual understanding of ourselves, and we're receptive to what life is bringing us to. And for many people, that will mean getting directly involved with their hands and their bodies and their life path on a more tactile way of wanting to do work that's what would be considered charitable type work to help others. And then on the inside, for all of us, it's going to be a lot of soul searching through this synodic cycle of the next 13 years with these two really deep inner work where we learn a lot of lessons about our egos and try to upgrade our value systems, try to bring in some of that into reality. And so we've got some, really interesting times, and we'll be really feeling that. And I've talked to so many people, not only in the last 13 years and seen those upgrades of Aquarius, but I've had so many people, in this attitude of, don't worry, everything, despite all the insanity in the real world around us, there's this great undertone of a great spiritual awakening within individuals in the myriad of forms that individuals are too. But yet there's this connection, like the Pisces thing at the tail, where there's this understanding there is a connection, but each one is finding that in their own individual way in that school of fish, so it's really seemingly we can tap into, there's people seem to be ready to make this bigger shift. And so maybe this is the focus of the higher octave of Pisces, where the connections are and the respect and tolerance for all different ways to come together and be able to do that. All right, just want to mention a couple other things. Like I said, all the planets have been going direct now for since the beginning of February, right? So it's been 2 months, and we still have another 3 weeks of that before Pluto goes retrograde on the 29th. And that will be a subtle shift. That's not going to stop the train from moving forward, that's for sure. That will be a couple weeks later when Mercury goes retrograde in Gemini, the second time Mercury will go retrograde this year, once again in an air sign, and will go back into Taurus eventually in that cycle. But we'll talk about that next month. So Pluto stationing retrograde, like I said, is a much more subtle shift, and it's just going to be pretty much the last 7 months it's been going forward. And Pluto really represents, especially at an individual level, the like really looking, having transformative events occurring that are really affecting our psyche, our inner psyche, and our subconscious, and opening things up that maybe weren't consciously accessible to prior to that. So there's a lot of events that have probably occurred in most of our lives in the last 7 months where we really went through some transformative direct experiences. And these next 5 months, starting on April 29th, when Pluto's retro for the next 5 months, will be a time where we really do the inner work on that, where we really integrate a lot of that stuff. And then, when you think about the world too, it's the same way. There's been some incredibly transformative world events, and Pluto is so much about that. It's beyond Saturn, so like it's working on a level that is hard for the human mind to understand, because it's a collective energy that is like looking at all of us as one organism, really. The earth and the people and life on it. Pluto looks at really as one organism, and we've had some incredible things happen in the last 7 months that are very Plutonian in nature, not the least of which has been, a new war in Europe. And which is so fitting of that Pluto type energy of destruction and violence and death that leads to change and transformation. So we're going to really have those next 5 months to really integrate a lot of, not only what happened in society and as a race together, because, obviously when something like this happens, you can see every human in the world gets somehow affected by this stuff, and then when you think about, at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, it's squaring Pallas at the same time that it's turning direct. So it's like a really intense marker of what's going on during this last 7 months and what we need to think about. And that is, a lot of our creativity is being blocked from our own ideals, like our own old ideals that we're still trying to fight for, and in very logical and intellectual ways are what's actually hurting us right now and wounding us. And that can have a lot to do with sexuality on an individual level too, really having to look at how our sexual issues may be holding up a lot of our energy, blocking things that cannot be transformed because there's things that are not healthy going on there. So being overly obsessive about any of our ideals is bringing a lot of stress and tension and destruction to not only ourselves individually, but to the world when we're stuck on old things. So really, I think that's going to be the gist of what we need to chew over in those 5 months coming up after Pluto turns retrograde on the 29th. And then a month ends with a nice thing, Saturn trine Ceres. I like that a lot. I wonder if that by the end of this month, the authorities are going to kind of, the traditional authorities, the people who have power in the real physical world and can move a lot of energy at once, will kind of start to get a grip on some of the financial turmoil, which is another thing. Yet, we talk about last 7 months, that's another big thing that Pluto thing is showing, that, Pluto is all about international finance, banking systems tied together throughout the world. And that obviously has been way under stress. We've, seen prices shoot up all over the world on all these basic things, and people are feeling like even though there's work available and there's a lot of currency and money available to tap into it, and maybe even making more, that they're actually not getting as much out of it. So I think this Saturn trine Ceres, we could see authorities start to intervene in that situation and take some steps in the real world, Saturn, to start to help trine people in what they need to get series. So I think that'll stabilize, resources a bit for us, get our needs maybe feeling like they're more stabilized, and getting, which, obviously means we feel more nurtured ourselves. And what happens then is we get more supportive in our own world, of our own family. And a lot of times, this does, Saturn again, it's going to, what is going to make us feel like that? Getting the things we traditionally have had, food stability, energy stability, things like that, things that are very, very basic to our needs, rent stability, things that we need to have healthcare stability, things that we need to have, those structures in our life to have a stable and healthy life and have stable and healthy relationships. So big chance there. And that's, just the first of 3 hits. I think that, even when you think about that one too, you can even see, and we all know, like, we may not be getting all the stories of everything correctly in the media. There's no argument there, but, even like we can see like how the effects of like the sanctions on Russia are starting to, change slowly the situation there. So that can even be a little bit of a taste of the effectiveness of when, these authorities do make moves together that can help, the larger scale and stabilize things. So anyway, okay, now you can understand why I only wanted to do the monthly, and I will do the weekly tomorrow by itself. This is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. It is available as a weekly forecast every week on YouTube. Become a follower if you have a YouTube account and turn your notifications on. No reason to actually look at the camera of the video. The point is, or even listen to the astrological terms if you're not interested, if you don't know the astrology. The point is to hear the energy of what's going on each week so that you can work with it. So you don't need to see me. You can listen to me on a podcast instead. And they're available on all types of podcasts. Just look up the Astrological Winds channel. I'm sure you'll find it. If you can't find it on one, look at another, because there's a bunch of them out there that's got it. Also, Astrological Winds channel, you can become a follower on Instagram, and I post the links to each of the blogs there. Or if you need to, you can friend me on Facebook. It's a private account, Matthew Lawton, Lauten, and I will put you in, and I also put the link there every week now. Also, it's a free service, so I'd really appreciate it if you could pass the link on as payment back to me. If you'd like to give me a donation, I won't say no to that. And nothing is too small. And, I'm on Zelle, PayPal, and Venmo. And like I said, readings. I've been a professional astrologer for over 20 years. Do all types of readings. I recommend doing your birth chart and knowing that it never leaves you, but every year get a predictive reading. It's very similar to what I'm doing here each week, but it's your personal weather forecast for the next year. And that way you can work with the current energy that's triggering your chart. It's really, much more in a harmony and flow of life and ability to get things right when you work well with it, rather than kind of seeing what sticks to the wall after you throw to it, so to speak. Also, relationship charts, children's charts, fixed star readings, if you're interested in deeper soul purpose, really cool reading. You can get a lot of deep information out of that too. Astrocartography, relocation, all types of stuff. Classes too. I've got 5 beginners classes. If you're a student, they're $20, $25 for non-students. They're available. I can just send you a link to Dropbox anytime. And if you have any kind of event, you need an astrology lecture, question and answer, some kind of entertainment, fun. Once again, MATTHUE823 at gmail.com is the best way to get me, but you can always leave me a comment in the comment sections too of any of the places the blog is put on. All right, tomorrow I will be posting the blog for the week of April 4th through 10th, and there's a lot going on this week too. So that's why I cut these things in 2 halves. So I'll see you all hopefully tomorrow again.